Desde las entrañables calles del sur de Chicago, la vida de Berto Aguayo nos habla de superación. Hijo de inmigrantes mexicanos, creció en un hogar sostenido por los incansables esfuerzos de su madre. Buscando pertenencia como muchos, se unió a una pandilla, pero el destino tenía otros planes. Con la ayuda del director de su escuela, Berto se sumergió en el mundo de la política a través del Mi'kmaq Challenge, iniciando su pasión por el servicio público. Atrás quedaron los días oscuros y tras una dura lección, Berto brilló como estudiante ejemplar en la Universidad Dominicana, incluso sirviendo como presidente estudiantil. Hoy coordina programas comunitarios y se prepara para un internado en Washington, D.C. Su mirada está fija el próximo año en la Escuela de Derecho. Bienvenidos a Demente, donde historias como la de Berto Aguayo nos inspiran a crecer y transformar. Bienvenido, Berto Aguayo.
As you know, everybody, every single opportunity that we get to come live here is we interview somebody in the community, somebody that is moving forward in applying leadership and really demonstrating that we can get the outcome that we want. Today is no different. We've invited somebody that you saw in the intro is doing phenomenal things. So we're excited to have a conversation with him about what it takes and sort of mindset to have a different outcome, regardless of how hard your childhood was or what sort of obstacles you may be facing. So without further ado, let me give the warm welcome to Berto Aguayo. Berto, how are you, man?
I am great, Mauricio. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for making the time, really. I mean, when I read your story, I felt identified because I always say that, when I was the age of 14, I got jumped in a gang. I mean, my upbringing was a little bit different, but even I got here when I was 8. At the age of 14, I got jumped into a gang, but that's pretty much it. Because after I got jumped, I left to Mexico to kind of pick up on my Spanish. So I didn't live through a lot of what you lived through. So I want to go into that and sort of explore what the mindset was and what led you to join the gangs. Obviously, there's a common reason why a lot of kids do it. I'd like to learn more about what you think that led you to do it, and then how we actually evolved from there. So. How did that happen for you?
Yeah, well, growing up in the South Side, I think there were 3 things that I think led to me ultimately joining a gang. And number 1, it was the fact that my mom was a single mother, right? And she had to work, 12, 14 hours a day in order to care for me and my younger sisters. But that also meant that I was home alone without a lot of supervision. So that's number 1. And then number 2, that coupled with the fact that there weren't a lot of opportunities for me to do anything else in the neighborhood that was productive, led down the wrong path as well. And then lastly, I think the lack of exposure. When you are in those shoes, 13 years old, single mom in the South Side, taking care of us with limited opportunities, your sense of the world shrinks, right? Absolutely. And you don't have a real idea of what the world looks like. Your world is restricted really to your block, right? And to your neighborhood. And at that age, it was the only thing that was available to me. Obviously, I got older and I realized that was not the right way to go, but it wasn't until someone exposed me to a bigger world and really believed in me the way I didn't even believe in myself. And that happened when I was 17 years old, 4 years after I had joined the gang. My high school principal tells me, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. You're destined for better things. And she gave me an opportunity to work in an elected official's office on the north side of the city. And so when she gave me that opportunity, it opened my eyes to a bigger world. And it helped me see what she saw in me that I hadn't seen in myself up until that point. And so I think ultimately that exposure, people believing in me, is what ultimately helped me change my life.
Yeah, before we go into there, though, because I think it's important what you said initially was that, and the reason I want to bring that up and highlight it is because it's the environment. I mean, you're so right. It's your vision is so limited, and you kind of have to work with what you have there and how strong the environment is. At least for me, being rejected, I came here when I was 8 years old. I didn't speak the language. Obviously, we were dressing differently, spoke differently. You could tell that we were not, born in the States at that time. And so a lot of rejection from a lot of other groups, per se, sort of pushed me to go more towards the people that were kind of, actually they were kids that were influenced by other kids already in like high school that were in the gangs. The influence was coming all the way from there because they had older brothers that were in sort of grew up in that thing. So and so I think the message here, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, is how the environment that we are in, no matter how smart we think we are, is going to change you. It's going to mold you into that. You'll become that no matter how strong you think you are.
Yeah, and I think there's a give and take there because, right, the philosophical argument is always, is it the individual or the environment, right? And I think really it ultimately ends up being a fusion of both. But I think when you're young and impressionable and you lack an understanding of the world, you're more likely to be influenced by your environment. And then obviously when I got older and I was able to see a bigger world and I was able to have a stronger mindset, I was able to not let my environment completely determine who I was, and therefore be able to, at the same time, change the expectations that my environment had set for me, but then also in part, then try to shape that environment as well. But you have to, it's kind of a process, right? You can't be that strong as a 13-year-old to know the world and to think outside of the box like that. At least I didn't. And so until I was able to have the tools, the knowledge, and the mindset to be able to shift away from that, that's when I was able to say, hey, enough is enough. I don't want this for myself. I can do better things. I can be more productive and be a better person and a better citizen of the world. And that's when I decided to leave and to change my life.
Yeah. Thanks for for putting that into a different angle, because I have always been saying that, no matter how smart you think you are, the environment's going to change you. And even at this moment in my life, like where I'm a little bit more aware and have stronger mindset, like being around successful entrepreneurial people, they're going to expand your vision in that way. It's like you're going to be brainwashed no matter what. That's just deciding like really who you're allowing that to happen to do it. So, but then it comes to a point. Do you remember that time? Like what was that moment where you said somebody saw something in you, and you can call it a divine accident or whatever, that you found somebody who expanded your vision, and so you kind of woke up out of that coma and you said, wait a minute, I could be doing something different with my life. Because in all these interviews I'm doing, there was always that moment, that one person that came to our lives, that shift, that it's almost like we're going in this direction, right? Something hit us, boom, all of a sudden we're going in this direction. And so how did that happen for you? And who is this person?
Yeah, so that transformative moment for me was when I was 17 years old. I was serving an in-school suspension for a gang fight. And my high school principal walks into the office and says, you're better than this. You're destined for better things. Here's a job opportunity. Apply for it. And if you need a recommendation letter, I'll write you one. And so I applied to this job. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but this job ended up being an internship at an elected official's office in the north side of the city. For those of the viewers that don't know the city of Chicago, the south side is predominantly working class. The north side is predominantly upper middle class, and it looks a lot better and looks a lot, not better, but nicer. And it's just different than the south side. And so when I was going into that office, into the north side, I realized, two things. Number one, that not every neighborhood was like my neighborhood that I had grown up in the south side. And that exposed me to a bigger world just on the other side of the city. And it filled me with a sense that there was an injustice there, because how can we live in the same city with such inequality, where one side of the city looks completely different from the other? And the second thing that it did for me was working in that office, helping people, connecting them to, garbage cans, to filling potholes, to community cleanups. It filled me with a sense of purpose, a purpose that only comes from the dignity of having a job, right? Of going and doing something and contributing to society. And the fact that someone entrusted me to do that changed my perspective. And ultimately it led me to, leaving the gang and saying, this is enough. I want out, and changing my life. And that was that transformative moment, that internship experience when I was 17 years old. Okay.
No, very, very cool. So see it's just so amazing how one little spark can ignite such a great and totally different future. And in your case, obviously, somebody sort of took the leadership and said, hey, kind of show you a better direction. And so I see it somehow you're sort of paying it forward too, say, allowing all these different people. So when did the epiphany came about to start this increase the P's? And what's the motive and the grand vision behind that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the visions for that was really my journey and the way someone changed my life, and me wanting to pay it forward in that way, in the same way that someone believed in me and someone gave me an opportunity. I wanted to make sure that I passed it forward and gave other people opportunities and helped them see what they didn't see in themselves, just like I didn't at one point. And when I graduated college, I had an intention of, I didn't want to just make it, quote unquote. I wanted to make my community a better place and bring other people up with me, because there's no point in achieving great heights if you don't help others along the way. And so when I graduated college, I started the organization really with the intention of providing young people with civic opportunities to make a difference and to get paid for it, so that way not only could they change their community, but in the process of changing their community, they could recognize their own power to change their own life in the process. And since then we've hired and trained hundreds of young people in that same spirit and in that same civic service. And it's been a beautiful thing to see grow. And now as I'm transitioning into a global law firm, I'm doing the exact same thing. Over the summer, we brought in 65 youth to the global law firm where I'm working at, just so they can see themselves potentially working at a firm like that. And, ultimately it's not just about getting in the door, but it's about holding the door open for other people to come along too.
You just mentioned something that's golden, which is all about vision expansion. And I look at everything that you are doing, all the people you've been able to, be with, meet. These are high profile people. And so all of this is constantly expanding your vision as to what you can accomplish, what can be done. And now you're passing it on to other people. So who are you modeling right now that you can point back to that continuous expansion of what you can become?
I mean, I really don't know a specific person, but I do always think about, there was this quote by Matthew McConaughey when he talks about people that he looks up to, and he always says, I look up to God. Right.
And it could have very well just have been that moment where you're like, hey, listen, I am so much capable of materializing just about anything. My past is in the past, right? And the future, I can write it to whatever it can be. And I'm not saying that that you're not, like, you probably got a clear vision as to what you wanted to do, and you've just been focused and working towards that. And I'm curious to know what that is, to see how big of a dreamer you are. In a way, I'm curious. And the second thing is to let people know that we're just limited by how big we dare to dream, right? Because we can dream small or we can dream big. But I know that you being exposed and being at the White House and being connected with all these important political figures and everything that you're doing, it's done something in your mind. And you've realized that you possess everything, right? It's not about whether you have the money or not, whether you have the context right now or not, that the action you're taking is really what will bring about those opportunities. And so those lessons, it's like, I'm curious to know, what are the lessons that you can, without having to go to your notes and say, man, these are, if I was to take this opportunity and leave people better than I found them, these are the lessons that I have learned that has dramatically changed my life. And I wish I could pass it on to the people listening and watching us today.
So there would be three things. Number one, that it's not about the destination, it's about the process, right? It should never be about the dream job, the dream title, the dream material, whatever. It's always about being a better person than you were yesterday. And that's always one of the things that I think in an age of social media where we're constantly looking for external validators, I think the best way to become a better person is just to look at yourself in the mirror every day and say, am I becoming better? And not be your own competition. Don't compete against anyone else, but compete against yourself daily. And I think that would be one, right? Focus on the process by competing against yourself every day and trying to become a better version of yourself. Number two, I think that in order to have a solidified process in which to do that, you need habits, right? Habits are what make the difference between consistent quality over time and just sparks of random talent, right? And if you think about doing the same thing habitually over and over, I get up at 4:30 a.m. every day to work out. I, go to school every day at the same time. I leave school almost at the same time every day. And that process and those habits of doing something over and over and over eventually becomes so automatic that it's who you are. And we are what we repeatedly do. And so if you habitually work hard and do the things that you want to do for yourself, you're going to get there. You're going to get there at one point. And then number three, what I call my non-negotiables. In busy days, we're all sacrificing and negotiating between busy schedules, whether I do this or I do that. And so I think it's important for everybody to know their non-negotiables, right? My non-negotiables in my life are pretty simple. My 5 a.m. workouts, my 3 meals a day, sleeping 8 hours a day. No matter what, those three things I'm not going to negotiate in my schedule. And that creates the foundation for my well-being, both physically, emotionally, and spiritually. But it also helps me just work that hard every day. And for some people, it may look a little different. Some people may, add yoga in there. Some people may add therapy as a non-negotiable. Whatever your non-negotiables are, solidify them, put them in the schedule, and don't sacrifice that for anything else that you got going on, because those are the things that make you feel good about yourself and improve your overall well-being. And so to recap, I would say, focus on the process, not the destination. Be, competing against yourself, not anyone else. Focus on creating healthy habits that will help you get to wherever you want to be. But then also have your non-negotiables, so that way you don't end up sacrificing things that contribute to your overall well-being.
Well said, man. Well said. Now I know somebody that has a vision and that's been able to really identify these I would say methods of operation, like what it really takes to create a habit and all those things you've just mentioned. I'm not going to repeat, but people like you I've identified, and I would even add myself to that. I'm a driven person. And every time that what motivates me in the morning, there's a lot of different things, but it's a grand vision. I'm not a religious person, I'll tell you that. But I've heard that there's on the scriptures, right? Where there's no vision, people perish. So I know you've got a big vision, and I want to emphasize more on that. Like, what are you working towards right now in terms of how you want to impact the world? Once you materialize that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the books that I read that really resonated with me was The Road to Character by David Brooks, in which he talks about how do we build character as human beings. And he lays out a fork in the road where some people focus on things to add to their resume, right? And then he calls those resume virtues. But then he also thinks about the other way to go is to have eulogy virtues and to chase eulogy virtues. Instead of chasing what you want to put on a resume, chasing things that you would want people to say at your funeral, right? And my vision is to be good to people, to work hard every day. And so that by the time that my eulogy comes around, I can manifest what I want people to remember me by and what I want them to say about me at my funeral. Because ultimately, I think for a lot of us, that's my vision, right? I want to, whenever that happens, hopefully it doesn't happen until a long time from now. I want people to be able to say that I was a dreamer, that I was a person who worked hard, that I helped others, that I was a good friend, and that I gave a lot to my community, and that I inspired other people to be the better version of themselves. And if I can have that kind of eulogy, you know. And I always think in that sense, I'm always trying to chase, you know, that eulogy or be that person, because if I focus sometimes too much on the titles and, you know, the positions, and sometimes they can get lost in the values that I want to live by. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, man. And what I've identified also is like leaders are, for the most part, givers, and they don't have this mentality. Like I remember growing up, when, I mean, this is just things that I remember as a kid, you know, growing up. Hay expresiones en español que dice, pues para qué acumulo dinero, además, si al final no te llevas ni un puño de tierra, como dice la canción.
Right.
And then I began to learn about these very successful people, and it's not about what they are going to take, but rather what they're going to leave behind. Like, no es lo que te llevas, es lo que dejas, ¿no? O sea, no, ese es el tema del legado, ¿no? So that's it's just good to see that pattern just repeating itself over and over again with people that have high levels of success. And I think they do have high levels of success because they are more of a givers, and they're working towards something that they can leave behind, impact humanity in such a way, which is what I see you doing. And I know you kept it a little bit more philosophical. I was looking more as a personal achievement. Like, I know you're going to law school, right? What do you envision in that? Would you specialize in? Like, where are you going? What are you working towards on a daily basis in terms of a professional career?
Yeah, I mean, on a daily basis, in terms of a profession, I want to be able to continue to do my community work and do policy advocacy and be able to help out, you know, people who need legal aid, and make sure that people who need legal aid are connected to legal aid, because the vast majority of our country, unfortunately, cannot afford legal services. And so I want to be able to continue doing that in a pro bono capacity. And at the same time, I also want to have a real interest in intellectual property, right? And making sure that like trademarks, copyright, you know, people's ideas, people's reputations, companies, small businesses. Like, I have a real interest in figuring out how we promote and protect people and organizations' intellectual property. And so I know it's kind of is one thing that I didn't expect out of law school,
especially in this day and age, right? Yeah. But I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, yeah. So, like, you know, there's a lot of, especially nowadays, there's a lot of up and coming emerging Latino entrepreneurs who, you know, who need to know how to protect their intellectual property portfolios. How do you protect a mark? How do you protect your ideas, your expressions, you know, your trademarks, your copyrights, your trade secrets, even, right?
Absolutely. If the things that you don't know that can really kill you, and I think that right there, somebody could easily take advantage of them, but not knowing that simple thing, or let's say basic. I am curious about.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'd rather hear you.
You know, I was saying, oftentimes, you know, in the Latino community, our communities lack knowledge of how to protect their intellectual property. We have thriving small businesses in our communities that, you know, sometimes are taken advantage by others because they just don't know how to protect their marks, you know, their trademarks.
The more informed competitors, the big corporations, you know, they come in and they literally steal that. I'm curious about this. You know, I lived in Chicago for 22 years. That's really the city that saw me come in broken financially, broken emotionally, broken mentally. I dived into the financial world and was able to become the first millionaire in my family. I don't say that to brag. It's just to inspire, know that you can make things happen. But it also, that city of Chicago has always been, like, every time you turn on the news and you hear you got shootings here, shootings there, and as you travel around across the country, you say you're from Chicago, they sort of, you know, raise the bra, like, well, there's a lot of crime over there. You know, people killing themselves over there a lot, and a lot of it is true. So came out from the gangs and all that. I'm just wondering, of the things that you are applying and the work that you're doing, what have you seen has the biggest impact in trying to get more young kids out of gangs and just, you know, fighting crime?
opportunities, and more
For sure.
specifically, extracurricular and employment opportunities, right? The shortest way and the easiest, most effective way to get someone to change is to expose them to a bigger world, to what they can be capable of, to actualize their full potential. And the way to do that most effectively is through connecting them to an opportunity. In neighborhoods like mine, and if you look at the top 10 neighborhoods with the most violence in the city of Chicago, they are also the same top 10 neighborhoods with the highest levels of young people between the ages of 16 to 24 that are unemployed and out of school. And that lack of opportunity is what ultimately drives a lot of the violence. And I say it as a firsthand account of what happens when you give someone an opportunity, right? You're able to change the trajectory of someone's life, change the trajectory of someone's family. And then ultimately the exponential effect is that you're able to change the community one opportunity at a time. And so that's what I would say.
Yeah. You know, the one thing you and I have in common, and I think a lot of other people have in common, is I was providing an opportunity. Obviously, I on my side, like I said, I left to Mexico at 14, came back at 18, and started working at the factory in Motorola. But I couldn't make ends meet. But it was an opportunity that got me out of that sort of rat race into a different place. In your case, it was that opportunity that the principal gave you, that sort of that spark that ignited this great future that you are embarking on. So yeah, I think it is opportunity and leadership, which is one of the most noble things you can do. That's why I really admire what you're doing, and I mean, you know, because what's the most leadership is everything, man, and inspiring others, you know. So you can only inspire through leadership and demonstrating that it can be changed. So yeah, we'll wrap it up at there. Keep these to be about 30 minutes long, but unless you have any final comments on that, man, in that realm of the importance of leadership, right, and some of the work that you're doing, like obviously uniting Black and Brown communities and recognizing the power that we have, a powerful message that you want to close our podcast today with.
Yeah, I mean, I would end with, I think it was Biggie Smalls who said, we can't change the world unless we change ourselves. And
Totally.
I think that's one of the key things that we all need to do in order to change this world that we're in.
Well, that goes back to speaking about leadership. Man, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I learned a lot for sure, and confirmed a lot of other things, man. I have nothing but wish you the best. Te deseo lo mejor. Hasta allá, hasta la ciudad de Chicago. Te mando un abrazo. Y pues espero que no sea la última vez que platicamos. Te vamos a ir siguiendo para ver cómo este progreso que llevas y hasta dónde impactas vidas, campeón.
Ya dijiste,
Berto Aguayo.
Carnal. Te aprecio. Gracias.
Cuídate mucho. Cuídate. Hasta pronto.
Nos vemos.
Hasta pronto, claro que sí. Pues ahí lo tienen. A lo mejor nos faltó hablar un poquito más de español, pero ustedes, este programa de Dimensional o de Demente es un programa bilingüe que nos escuchan, pues, nuestra gente que está en Estados Unidos, México y en cualquier otra parte del mundo. Así que a todos los que se quedaron aquí, gracias por compartir su tiempo con nosotros. Por favor, compartan este tipo de mensajes porque es lo que puede inspirar a otros jóvenes a tomar el cambio. Solamente es la línea entre los que logran hacer grandes cosas y los que no, es finita, es simplemente tomar acción hacia otro camino y simplemente confiar que la acción te va a dar el conocimiento para llevarte al próximo paso y que no hay acción agresiva, masiva, imperfecta que pase desapercibida. Tarde o temprano alguien va a notar esos esfuerzos y te va a tomar de la mano y te va a llevar a ese nuevo lugar. El tema es siempre estar trabajando en cómo mejorar uno y cómo agregar valor constantemente. Entonces, habiendo dicho eso, no me queda más que desearles que tengan excelente día. La información de Berto Aguayo, como siempre, la voy a poner aquí donde están viendo esta entrevista para que lo puedan seguir y obviamente también compartir con él qué fue lo que se llevaron de esta entrevista que tuvimos con él. Les mando un abrazo, nos vemos en la próxima entrevista. Que estén bien. Chao, chao.